Luca, welcome, buddy. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me here.
Welcome. Maybe we can start by telling us a bit about yourself and your background, like a very brief introduction on you.
Yes, so my job is I am a consultant. I work with business leaders to improve the way they manage their team or to develop their team so that they can manage and grow the level below theirs. And then I also published now 11 books on economics, behavior, and management. And
Nice.
I am based in Turin, Italy.
Nice. I've actually discovered you through the investing community, through the podcast you did with Guy Spear. I'm also myself a very small investor. I don't think I could call myself an investor, but I love that world, and I think there are some fantastic people over there, and a lot of cool stuff is happening. And the reason why I invited you, and even if this is like an IT podcast, let's say, like something much more centered around software development, is that I felt that all the things that you are saying can be easily applied into someone who is working in the software development. And I feel that also, even if your explanations are very simple and very clear formulated, but your way of thinking is very engineering. And after that, I actually discovered that you were an engineer by formation. So this is how you started.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and also like software development is also one of my hobby. Every now and then I do some small projects also for a few clients. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, so I found out something new about you. Nice. One of the books. You are a great author, in my opinion. And I've read two of your books, "Winning Long-Term Games" and "Ergodicity." And I was blown out, I think, from, I don't know, framework point of view, mental framework point of view. I felt that the concept of ergodicity changed uh, quite substantial how I see the world and how I see my career and my life and so on. And in order to set the tone of the discussion, can you please just explain what ergodicity is? And sorry for asking you to do this. I know you have done it 1,000 times so far, but I think it's a crucial aspect that will govern all of our discussion.
Yes, the best way to explain ergodicity is through a story. And I usually tell the story of my cousin, who was a very good skier ever since a young age, very excellent. He made it to the world championship for his age bracket. And then sadly, one leg injury after another, he had to stop very early. And from him, I've learned a lesson that performance is subordinate to survival. And I'm not making the banal point that survival matters to performance, but I'm saying that it matters more than performance over the long term. And to demonstrate this, I usually ask the following question, which is imagine that my cousin is participating to a ski championship consisting of 10 races. He's a very good skier, so he has a 20% chance of winning each race. However, he also takes a lot of risks, and so he has a 20% chance of breaking his leg in each race. And the question is, how many races is he expected to win over a championship of 10 races? The naive answer is 2 races, because we think 10 races, 20% chance of winning each, 10 times 20% makes 2. However, if we crunch the numbers, the real answer is 0.71. And the reason is because if he breaks his leg in the first race, not only he loses that race, but he loses all following ones, and so on. If he breaks his leg in the second race, he loses all the following ones, and so on. So we get two takeaways from this story. One is that irreversibility absorbs future gains. Breaking your leg, which is irreversible, or at least has irreversible consequences, the problem is not only that you lose that race, but you lose all following ones. In investing, if you lost $1,000 on a bad investment, not only you lost $1,000, but you also lost all the future gains that those $1,000 could have produced. The second principle is that when there is irreversibility, you cannot extrapolate averages. You cannot say if the average wins over one race is 0.2, over 10 races is going to be 2. You cannot do that. Same thing in investment. If you have an investment that you know is growing 5% per year, you cannot say that over 10 years is going to be 50%, or even more precisely, like 1.05 elevated 10. You cannot do that because irreversible losses absorb future gains. And this principle that when there is irreversibility, you cannot extrapolate averages is basically what we call ergodicity.
Correct. I like that example. There is also explained through the flip of a coin. So you are proposed a game. You have $100, let's say, and you flip a coin. If the coin is head, for example, you win 60%. But if it's on the other side, you lose 40%. So even if initially this seems as a good game, if you play it for long enough, you lose. And
Exactly.
the fun stuff, when I heard about this, I was telling all of my friends, and actually the only one who knew that this was a bad game to play, extremely on the long term, was a friend of mine that was very into poker. And he knew that. Exactly.
Exactly, that's the attention to the real world. And then it really helps also to think in terms of outcomes rather than expected gains. Like I make the example with like flipping the coin and you double the amount if you win, and let's say 60% if you win, and you lose the
40%.
yeah. So no, let's say for example, like you give me $10, and if you win the toss, I give you $25, and if not, I get your $10. And let's say that you have $20 in your portfolio. It seems like it's an advantageous game. However, if you lose twice in a row, which has a 20% chance of happening, you lost all of your money, and you
Exactly.
can not only you cannot go back, so you
Exactly.
cannot realize the future winnings, but also the outcome is you have a 25% chance of your wife, for example, getting very angry at you because you lost your money, and a 75% chance of making a tiny gain. And that also makes it obvious that we cannot just look at the numbers, but we need to think in terms of outcomes and outcomes over the long term.
Exactly. Great point. And speaking of outcomes, um, how one should formulate his or her career strategy under this concept of ergodicity. And by career, I don't refer just what would you recommend as strategies, even if you are a small business owner or freelancer or traditional 9 to 5er. How would you apply this ergodicity concept in a career strategy?
Yeah, so the first concept, the one that you cannot extrapolate averages, applies a lot on taking risks. For example, imagine that you are thinking whether you can overpromise to a client or whether you can lie to your boss as a strategy to get ahead. And let's say that you are a very good liar and you have a 99% chance of getting away with it and only 1% chance of getting caught. At this point, it might seem like lying is a great strategy. However, it's only a great strategy over the short term and it doesn't extrapolate well over the long term. Why? Because if you lie once a week, you have a 99.5% chance of getting caught over the next 5 years, and at which point your career might be over. So the first takeaway is do not take risks or do not do unethical actions that are generally okay if you only do them once, okay more times. So this is the first thing. The second point is that over the short term, your career outcomes are mostly determined by how good you are at your current job. However, over the long term, so let's think over 5 years or over 10 years, your career outcomes are not much determined by how well you do your current job only. I mean, of course, you need to be doing it at least somehow well, but it's mostly determined by whether you are able to build skills, build trust, and build relationships. And so it's why it's very important to be able to adopt this long-term framework in which you need to think, even if building trust, building skills, and building relationships will do nothing for me, for my income, for example, over the next 3 months, I should still do it, because if I don't do it, in 5 years, I will find myself almost in the same situations as where I am now. So this is the second thing. And then the third principle is the idea that almost everything in life is a bet. So the chances that you get your dream job or your dream client or your dream project or your dream role the first time you try are extremely small, or are relatively small,
Correct.
not extremely small, but I don't know, depending on the people, it might be 10, 30, 50%, maybe even 70%, but there is still a considerable chance that you will have to try multiple times. Maybe that you will have to try multiple jobs, maybe that you will have to reiterate on your role, on the kind of projects you work on, and so on, and you need to take this into account. Like, you cannot have a strategy which is just, I do what I'm doing, right, I have this thing in mind, and I will just work it until it works. Because maybe you will have to change again, or it will take longer, and it just needs to be baked in your strategy.
Correct. Fantastic. And speaking of bets, uh, my feeling is that the ergodicity, it's somehow also an invitation towards moderation. Basically, moderate your bets. Uh, but we are living in a world where we are always bombarded by romantic stories, like someone bets big, he goes or she goes all in on something, and they win big. The media is full with stories like Elon Musk, who was a few times in the bankrupt actually, or very close to bankruptcy or something like that. The Great Gatsby, I don't know, it's also another story romanticized. How should one approach this kind of stories? Or just to reformulate the question, what are some tools in order to deal with this temptation to go all in when you always hear about these like fantastic stories of people making it big?
Yeah, so this is a very important point. Let's talk about Elon Musk, since you mentioned it. So some people might not know this, but it's a fact that multiple times he went extremely close to bankruptcy. So this doesn't take away anything from his extreme skills. He's one of the most talented and hardworking people on the planet, and he deserves being where he is. However, because he took those extreme risks, it means that there was a chance that he would have failed. So maybe over 10 parallel worlds, we have 7 worlds in which Elon Musk is the successful billionaire that we know, and we have 3 parallel worlds in which instead his bets didn't pay off, and well, he ended up, I'm not saying forgotten from history, of course, but still, he's not nearly as successful as he is right now. So we need to be conscious of this survivorship bias. Now, the problem is that many people tell me, Luca, I understand survivorship bias. However, Elon Musk did a lot of great things for humanity, and we need more people like him. And my reply to this is yes, but why are there so few people like Elon Musk? And one reason is because they are not very good at managing risks. By which I'm not saying that Elon Musk should be very conservative. Of course not. That would prevent him from doing all the great things that he did. But just 10% better at managing risks. So, how do you manage risks while still taking risks? While still doing the things that enable great upside? So ask yourself in which way you're the most likely to fail. And the best way in which you can ask yourself this question is to imagine that you say, let's say I execute perfectly on my strategy, and yet I do not get successful. What's the most likely reason? And then you have a great action point on which to work. And I think that's a great way to manage risk.
Okay. So, keeping in the same line with managing risks, you personally have taken the route where you are now working for yourself. This one seems a bit, and in general, entrepreneurship is a more risky approach than a traditional 9 to 5. I'm curious, given that ergodicity invites towards, I don't know, taking the safest path, why have you chosen entrepreneurship? Why have you chosen being independent? And mostly I'm asking this for myself because I'm struggling also with the same dilemma. So I'm curious on your take.
Yeah, so I decided to work by myself just because I after I've learned my job of consultant in in a larger company, I just wanted the freedom to work exactly the way I wanted with my clients and the way in which I wanted to work, like choose my project, choose my clients, and so on. And that's why I did it. And then also because I wanted to capture a larger share, let's say, of what the clients were paying my company at the time. That said, it wasn't a complete jump into the void in the sense that one, I had a bit of savings from the years I worked in the corporate, and two, I moved back to my mother's place, so that at least during the first few months I didn't have to worry about paying rent and so on. And I had a great relationship with with my previous company, and I knew that if things didn't take off, I could always go back and get back the same job I had. So it wasn't as risky as it is,
Okay.
as it seems.
Okay. So the moral of the story is take risks, but take risks in a very calculated way, in a safe way.
Yeah, exactly. Like the point is not to take risks. It's not to take risks that you cannot recover from if they go wrong. That's the actual part where you need to pay attention.
Correct. Uh, I think how we work at least 8 hours per day or close to that. I think sometimes we don't get the time to spend 8 hours per day with our family. So the relationship we have with our work is extremely important towards our well-being. How does an ideal work day looks for Luca Dellanna? How does the perfect work day looks for you?
Yeah, so the other thing I didn't mention when you asked me why I chose this was also because I wanted flexibility and I wanted the ability to shape my work in a way that allows me to spend a lot of time with my family. And so, like right now, my work week looks. So my wife also does a work which is similar to mine. Like she's not a consultant, but she also, let's say, does a job which is mostly working from home remotely. So we get to spend a lot of time together. So my typical work week is basically 50% consulting and 50% writing books. And what happens is that basically my consulting clients, like when one of my clients ask me to help on an engagement, on a workshop, on a project, well, I do that. And the rest of my time I spend writing. And there is no fixed structure. So it's not like in the mornings I write and in the afternoon. I do consulting is more like depending on the clients, we agree the time in which I'm working with them for them, and then the rest of the time I write. Yeah.
Okay. Super interesting. So, somehow half. This is also something that sounds very good to me. So, I dream at one point to have a job where 50% is coding and 50% is working on some technical books. So, yeah, it's super nice. It's back. It's back. All good. All good. Uh, in the podcast you had with Guy Spears, you mentioned at one point, and now I'm trying to quote as close as possible, that you try to avoid optimizing for a specific time horizon. You try to make the choice that will make you happier also now, but also in the very long term. How, and this is, I don't know, maybe the ideal case where basically I don't take any risk. But my question is, what happens when the long term and the short term are getting in conflict? How are we able to take a decision that will satisfy both? Because it's one thing if God forbid, I know I'll die tomorrow, so most likely I will spend all my money. And on the other side is something else when I know that I will live till 100. Yeah.
So for me, it's about not trying to maximize to make it so that it's perfect both for the short and for the long term, because it's impossible. But it's rather, I try to spend part of my week doing things that I am happy with, even if my long term changes drastically, or maybe even if I die next month, for example. And then I try to spend another part of my week in which I'm building assets for my long term, which could be trust, relationships, money, and so on. And the important thing is to do them in ways that do not compromise each other. So when I'm doing things for the short term, they shouldn't be things that jeopardize the long term. And when I do for the long term, it shouldn't be things that jeopardize for the short term. So again, it's not about maximizing, it's just making sure that what you do for a time horizon does not jeopardize the other time horizons.
Okay, okay. Super nice. Great, great response. I like it. Uh, Now we'll switch a bit and talk about the elephant in the room, AI. And I know it's very hard to predict the future, but if you will have to take a bet, because so far we have spoken about bets, if you will have to take a bet, how do you think AI will impact the work marketplace? How do you think AI will impact the corporate world and so on? So, and what will be a good strategy to prepare and adapt for those changes as a entrepreneur, as a employee?
Yeah, so I think that if you have a job which involves the mouse or the keyboard, to the extent in which it involves the mouse or the keyboard, you will be impacted by AI. And what happens is that in your role, people working your role will divide into two categories. The one that is able to leverage AI to become much more productive, and the one that is not able to leverage AI or unwilling and will become much less productive. And the people that are in this second group, well, either they will lose their job or their wages will be severely impacted. Or if not impacted, they will be unable to grow. And then instead, the other part of people in that role, the one that is able to leverage AI, paradoxically, the chances are that either things stay the same or they get even better. Because of course, if you are able to produce more during your workday, you become more valuable to your company or to your clients, and you are able to justify a much higher wage. So for me, the thing is, if you work with the keyboard or the mouse, you need to acknowledge that now, I don't know if it's going to be 2 years or 5 years, but soon your profession will split into these two groups. people that leverage AI and people that don't. And you definitely want to be in the group that leverages AI. Now, what this means exactly depends heavily on the kind of job that you're doing. But I strongly believe that you need to ask yourself which parts of my job or which subparts of my job can AI be leveraged effectively to make myself more productive, and you should try to learn it. I suggest relatively fast.
Correct. I was actually speaking with a friend, he's also a software developer, and he told me like, dude, look, this AI thing is like for developers, is like trying to do accounting right now without having Excel. It's almost, or the A impact that Excel had in the accounting world will be what AI will have in the software development world. But I think, as you said, this can be extrapolated to anyone who uses a mouse and a keyboard, not just to software developers.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is that it will make a lot of projects that are not viable today viable. So I mentioned before that every now and then I do some software project. So this is something which I wasn't able to do until a few months ago. Why? Because I know how to write software because it's always been a passion of mine, but I wasn't able to do it productively enough to justify spending time working on it.
Correct.
Nowadays, in the last few months, I am finally able to be productive enough to justify spending part of my time working on it. Sometimes I do a small thing leveraging AI. I do a small tool that improves my clients, part of my clients, that enables them to consume some of the insights I produce in a different way. And I wasn't being able to do that. So I think this is also a good question, is what I couldn't have been able to produce before because my productivity was, I don't know, 30, and that didn't justify doing it. But now it justifies it now that my productivity doubled. Or in my case, it's even 10 per. Yeah.
Correct. Out of curiosity, what programming languages are you using when you are
So
writing?
right now I'm mostly developing with Next.js on Vercel, React mostly.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have questions all the time, just send me an email. I'm a React developer myself, and yeah,
Oh, cool.
if I
Thank you.
yeah, and also in Next I worked quite a lot. So if I can help with something, just send me an email. Let's talk a bit about your books and. You mentioned that you try to write half-half. So I assume that you don't have like a fixed schedule, and you write. You are passionate about a topic, and you write until you produce a given book on that topic. Out of curiosity, do you track your time? How much you spend on making a book? I'm curious. No, okay.
I do not, for two reasons. So the first one is that it's not really useful. Like, it's not like an industrial process that you can optimize much. I mean, the thing you can optimize is making sure that when you write, you're not, for example, checking your phone or doing those things. But other than that, it's really hard to optimize. And then the second thing is because there is just so much variability. Like the shortest book I wrote took me 2 weeks. It was during the lockdown, so in that moment it was 2 weeks, like doing that all the
Yeah.
time, but still 2 weeks. And the longest one took probably 9 months. So there is no point in measuring when you have such high variance.
Correct.
Yeah.
I get it. And speaking of your books, do you have a favorite? Which of one brought you the most joy while working on it? What's your favorite book written by you? After that, I will also ask you favorite books written by someone else, but written by you, which one brought you the most joy working on it?
Thank you. For me, I think it was Winning Long-Term Games, which is also the last one I published. And I think that's for two reasons. One is that I'm a much better writer than I was at the beginning. And so the better you get at something, usually the more you also enjoy doing it, or the more you feel like in flow when you're doing it. And the second one is that most of my other books are all niche. Like some books are for entrepreneurs, some books are for managers, some books are for everyone, but only if you are extremely passionate about psychology, for example, and so on. And this is probably the first book that can really help everyone. I mean, also 100 Truths You Will Learn Too Late was a book for everyone, but I think that this one is just substantially better. Like, I think that 100 Truths was a good book, and Winning Long-Term Games, instead, it's a phenomenal book.
Indeed, indeed. That I can vouch for. I read the whole book and I
Thank you.
couldn't put it down. So when initially I listened one or two podcasts with you on about the book, and after that, when I started to read, I couldn't put it down. So
Oh, thank you. On this, if you do that, please let the authors know. No, they would be so glad.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I wrote you on Twitter. I left you. I think I wrote. I tagged you on a Twitter message a few times.
Oh my God, I must have missed it.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry.
It's,
But
it's so weird because usually I reply to everything. So it must really not have shown in the notifications. I'm sorry.
yeah, I get the same. I get the same. Notifications are really bad. Uh, and continuing on the topic of books and mixing it with ergodicity, I'm curious. Instead, you writing 10 books, smaller ones, isn't it also like a sign of ergotic, not ergotic, but isn't like ergodicity strategy based? Instead of taking one, trying to write the perfect book, instead you've made multiple smaller bets.
Yeah, for sure. So this is something that if you ask any professional writer, and by professional writer, I mean someone who wrote more than one book, they will all tell you that they have absolutely no idea about how successful a book will be.
Okay.
And that's not only about books, also about movies. Like, we know that because there are a lot of surprises all the time. You get a famous movie director that does a movie that they think will be very successful and then it's not. And then you get the opposite. So, and even if you are not an author, you can know it yourself writing on Twitter. You are not able to predict whether this tweet that you think is very good will actually get a lot of likes, and then maybe another tweet that you don't think is particularly good gets a lot of likes. And so that's why it's necessary to make multiple bets for this kind of endeavors, such as writing or publishing.
In the same topic, mostly as a follow-up to your answer, there is quite a good book. Is name the name of the book? It's Hollywood Economics. You will find it on Amazon. And the idea of the book is exactly this: that the guys from Hollywood, literally, with all the money, all the resources that they literally have no idea if a movie will be a blockbuster or it will be a fail. So yeah, that book speaks exactly about this. Like just they put movies out there and hope some of them will be good and make multiple smaller bets instead of a big one. Um, what recommendations now after making all of these books? What recommendations would you have for aspiring uh, non-fiction author? So, what do you recommend to someone who is trying to write a good non-fiction book?
So, if you're trying to write a nonfiction book, there is a book which you should absolutely read, which is called, one second, I need to get it because
Mhm.
I'm terrible with remembering names. So the author is Sabine Reminer, I believe, and the name is, one second, I'm taking, um, Thinking Like Your Editor.
Thinking like your editor. Okay.
Yes,
Uh,
it's a phenomenal book about well, about learning how to write, but also like if you want your book to get published.
Okay, okay. Nice. Okay. I will link that one in the show notes. Speaking also on publishing, you have self-published your books now. If I
Yes.
know that. Why have you taken this route and not the traditional publisher route for your books?
So the real answer is that it's just easier, and I do not care much about, for example, having a publisher's brand behind me. No, more seriously, actually, there are advantages and disadvantages. If your book is niche, let's say that the advantages of getting a publisher are lower. If your book is general, having a publisher helps much more. And my first books, especially at the beginning, were quite niche. So this is one reason. Second reason is not having a publisher helps me iterate faster, because the moment I finish a book, I can publish it. I discover a typo, I can correct it. I get the idea for an extra chapter, I can add it, or it's instantaneously present on Amazon.
Okay.
So disadvantages. Another advantage is that you get a higher share of the royalties, usually, with most traditional publishers.
Correct.
That says that there are also advantages with working with publishers. So one is that you get more guidance. Two is that you get more distribution, if distribution is your bottleneck. I'm happy of having gone self-publishing for the first part of my career. Right now, since a few months, I'm a bit more active in looking for publishers, and probably my next book, which I'm currently writing, will be published by a traditional publisher. But I think it's a good trajectory.
Okay. I would add to that, for me, self-publishing a book, it also adds that business side to it. Like you are happy for each sale that you make, and you check reports every morning, and you try to market, and that stuff for me, it's super fun to do. It's something
Yes,
that
exactly. Exactly. And then you get a bit more of a connection with the readers,
Exactly.
especially if you sell with websites such as Gumroad. So my books are paperbacks and Kindle. You can find them on Amazon.
Yeah,
But
I will
if you
link that.
just want the PDF, you can get it on Gumroad. And Gumroad, for example, has two advantages. One is that you get to keep most of the money,
Yeah.
whereas Amazon gives you only a smaller percentage.
Yeah.
And two, you get to keep the email of the client if they decide so. So when they buy from Gumroad, they can also decide to subscribe to updates. And so, for example, you can let your readers know about when you publish another book and so on.
Correct. Um, And somehow closing the topic of books, what are your free books recommendations? Like for everyone, I mean, what are your favorite free books you'd recommend?
Yeah, so I have 4 favorite books. I cannot decide between the 4, but
Okay,
so
then
one
please.
is, of course, Nassim Taleb's Incerto,
Correct.
number 1. Number 2, so if you like um, if you're a manager, is going to be Scaling People by Claire Johnson Hughes, who was the CEO of Stripe. Then number 3, it's How Big Things Get Done by Bent Fleischberg. So if you look at Amazon, it says that it's a book for project managers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really for professional project managers. It's for everyone who at a certain point of their life has to manage a project. And since every one of us will be project manager in their life, even if it's just for your wedding or for your house renovation, reading that book will save you from so many mistakes that you might make while organizing a wedding or while planning your house renovation, that I really recommend it. How Big Things Get Done by Ben Fleischberg. And then the other book I really liked. So maybe this is not relevant for people who are already, like, let's say, at an established point of their life where they have quite mastery of their life, but it's extremely relevant for people in their teens, in their 20s, and maybe even early 30s. Despite the very cheesy name, it's The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey, or how you pronounce the name.
I know it. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Uh, Usually, I end the podcast by asking the guest what would be a good strategy for becoming a valuable software engineer. But in your case, I will expand the question and I will ask you, in your opinion, what is a good bet? What is a good strategy for becoming a valuable professional and someone who can really add value to the one around them, someone who is really helpful and really competent in what they are doing?
So I have three pieces of advice for that. So the first one is bring value. Value is defined not by what you do, but by what you do for the client, which can be an external client, or if you work into a company, sometimes it's an internal client. But the thing is, do not look at your job description. Your job description is something that is usually has been written by someone who doesn't really know your job very well, or was written for who you were a couple of years ago, and so on. And if you just look at the job description, you severely limit yourself. Second piece of advice is don't work only at your current job, but start doing the job which is the next step of your career. So this is problematic because for the first 20 years of your life, you are taught that if you do your current job well, you will get promoted to the next level. And it's true at school. If you do your current job at your current grade well, you will get promoted to the next grade. It stops being true the moment you start working. Of course, doing your current job above a certain threshold is still a prerequisite to keep the job, but in a corporate setting, you do not get promoted because you are excellent at your current job. You get promoted when you show signs that you will be able to handle your next job. So this is what you should do. Think in terms of what's your next job and start doing that. And then the third piece of advice, which puts together these two, the first and the second piece of advice, is let's say that you work 8 hours. Your workday is 8 hours. Never, ever do overtime on things which are on your current job description. And instead, either save your time for personal life if you don't have big ambitions, or if you have big ambitions, use any extra time you want to put towards work to build skills, build relationships, or show skills that are proper of the job above yours. So basically, do not treat your current job as something to maximize, but treat your current job as something to do the bare minimum for, and instead maximize what will bring you at the next level.
Super, super. Luca, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure having you. Uh, Good luck with the next book. Let me know and I will I will also promote it because I'm a fan. And thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for having had me. Thank you.
Cheers. All the best. And we're out. Uh, Super. Let me just save the